Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Sandro Forte Success Stream. Today, I'm very pleased to introduce Ed Lay. Now, there's not many guests on this Success Stream that I've ever had the privilege of working with one-to-one, but today we're going to talk about all things mental and physical well-being. Now, I'm obviously not Ed's greatest trophy when it comes to physical specimens, but I did work very hard. I'm sure he won't deny me that one. But this is a young man who has achieved some extraordinary things and made a life change, which many of us seek to do, but never quite get around to doing. So we're going to talk a little bit about work-life balance and doing some of the things that we want to do, never quite do in life. But as an expert in the field of personal performance, working primarily with CEOs on physical and mental fitness, well-being, and success, there is no better guest on the Success Stream today than Mr. Ed Lay. Ed, welcome to the Success Stream.
Thanks, Sandro. That's quite an introduction. I'll see if I can live up to it.
No pressure, but 92 countries around the world all beaming in, looking for some advice from you. So let's kind of start in the obvious place. Let's start now. I normally start in the beginning, but let's start from where we are today. Just describe to us what you do now in terms of the business that you run in Copenhagen, and then we'll talk about Copenhagen in a second.
Well, first and foremost, I'm a coach, right? So much like any other coach, I'm using tools and advice and feedback and exercises and different strategies to help people to create the results and the experience of life that they want. And first and foremost, people come to me because they're trying to achieve a level of success in their business, and usually the rest of their life is suffering in some way. So the culture of their business is suffering, maybe their home life is suffering, or maybe their own health is suffering, or maybe all of the above, while they're trying to quite often build a business to become very successful, often venture backed, while trying to navigate all of these challenges at the same time.
And I go back to when I first met you in Bath in the UK and came to your gym, and I remember you brutalizing me for several hours at a time. But when you started your business, it was as a personal trainer. So what kind of journey did you go on that then took you to personal performance coaching? Because although the two are similar, this job, this business you now run is much more specific. Why was there a transition from one to the other?
Well, I guess I was fortunate in the location that I was doing my personal training. It was the location you met me in was one of many locations that I was in prior to meeting you, and it just so happened to be in amongst all of the top consultancy firms and law firms and banks in the Bristol area. And so my clientele were partners and CEOs and consultants, and they were coming to me to get into a better physical shape, let's say. And so primarily with personal training, it's like, what are you eating and what sort of exercise are you doing? But as I started peeling away all of these layers, what I was finding was they didn't really not know what to do. They struggled to get themselves to consistently do it. And for some people, that was they couldn't tear themselves away from the office. For some people, it was they felt guilty going away from the office. For some people, it was, okay, I'm working a 70-hour week, an 80-hour week, and if I go to exercise as well, I feel guilty about not going home. And I know that I'm focusing on guilt a lot here, but a lot of it does come down to our relationships and work-life balance in particular. For these successful but incredibly busy people, what I was finding was they didn't just need me to hold them to exercise. They had a whole package of life that they were trying to build and navigate, and some of it just wasn't quite working for them. But it was more about habits than being made to do the things. And in fact, being made to do the things didn't really last much for them. And so as I started building kind of like this bigger and bigger picture, I started realizing that I could give someone a personal training session and I could see them 3 times a week for a year, or I could see them for one day and I could help them install the habit of exercising on their own forever. And so I started to kind of discover that I could have far more impact with exploring their habits than I could with trying to force the habits in that they or even I thought they should have.
Before we come back to that then, Ed, there was a piece of Harvard research, I believe, I hope I'm not misquoting this, that says something like for every hour of training, I'm talking about personal physical exercise that you put in, you live 3 hours longer. Now, obviously, that's a generalization, doesn't work out that way for everybody. But do you think there's a direct correlation between physical fitness? I guess some people come to you to get physically fitter, to be able to cope with the rigors of what they do every single day, and then mental fitness, resilience, the things that we need, up here to be able to deal with the stresses, the strains, the 70-hour working week, as you've mentioned. Direct correlation between physical and mental well-being in your experience?
It's funny, the human is the only sort of animal where we say you need to start adding these things in to be something. Whereas all other animals, if we start to see stuff missing, if we start to see physical play missing from an animal, we're like, this animal's not well. And so I like to think of it as the reverse. You don't get to live as long as you're supposed to if that physical play, that physical exercise that is hardwired into all animals, if it's not present, then there's something already fundamentally wrong. And so this is one of the challenges. This is one of the places where we sort of go wrong. Is we go, okay, so this person isn't exercising, so we need to make them. Whereas it's actually something deeper. Something's already fundamentally gone wrong if they're not physically playing. If you go to the zoo and those animals aren't playing, it's like something is wrong in the environment. The brain is experiencing some sort of threat that's causing it not to physically play right now. And so again, that's the essence of what I'm looking for. And I guess in short, to answer your question, yes, physical and mental is deeply intertwined.
That's a really interesting point. I've never actually heard it expressed in that way. So let's explore that one then for a second, because this has kind of come as a bit of a sidebar. But I'd like to pick up on it because it's a nuanced way of looking at it, but I think one that's worth just focusing on for a second. So to all of those of us, if we are fundamentally hardwired, as you say, as all animals are, to have that to have some kind of physicality in terms of our day-to-day activity. Now, I'm not talking about necessarily going to the gym any more than I'm sure you're talking about going to the gym, but any kind of exercise, play, as you put it. To those people who, I'll take you back, say, a year. I'm in my home in Italy, and it's the middle of February, and it's freezing cold, and the hailstones are coming down like tennis balls, and everything in my conscious mind is screaming, please don't get out of bed. It's very cold outside. Why don't we just put off till tomorrow what we could do today? Now, as it was, because I'd got into the habit of training, I still went out and did it. But I know that there's a vast majority of people, Ed, that would stay in bed and they would say, I'll do it tomorrow. And they kind of kick this metaphorical can down the road until at some point in their future, they get sick. They look back over their shoulder and they think, I wish I'd done whatever A, B, or C is for each individual person. So how do you then take the mind that is willing for many people, but the body that isn't? How do you reintroduce that fundamental principle of something that should be inherently natural to all of us? What are the things that you take CEOs through? And let's be honest, CEOs or not, we're all the CEOs of our own lives, right? So I think you're talking to a captive audience here. So what typically do you do to help them transition to or get back to the good habits that they had previously, or not, as the case may be?
Sure. Well, I guess again, there are lots of layers to it. What I would say fundamentally is happening for you when you're trying to convince yourself to go outside is you're feeling a real itch to exercise. And I um I'm guessing, but I imagine you get that if you don't exercise, you start to get you start to feel like, I really need to get this, I really need to do this now. So then the driver is something internal, like an urge, like a drive to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so firstly, I'm looking to restore that rather than the should, the must, the guilt of I should do this because I believe it's part of the me that I want to present to the world. I'm wondering why the urge isn't there. I'm wondering why, just like the drive to sleep is tiredness, and the drive to procreate has lust in it. It's like we have these fundamental feelings inside of us, and if the one to exercise isn't there, then I really want to peel away that, and discover what's happening there. So our brain doesn't see object and then infer meaning. It sees meaning. And so what I'm really helping people do is explore the meaning that their brain is making of the world and decide whether that's useful to what they want to be doing. If they're using shoulds or musts or guilt, for example, to try and force themselves to exercise, then there's always going to be some form of resistance to that. So I'm helping explore how their brain is mapping the world and peeling that away so that they can operate more skillfully, as the Buddhists say. Are you operating in a way that's going to cause the results that you want to be, and then why not? So I'm trying to peel away the meaning that the brain is making of the world.
You are you're a great advocate, and I know you're a deep studier of all things neuroscience. For speaking personally, I find, to your point about I have this itch to train. I do, it's true, and actually, I feel that when I don't train, I almost get a little bit despondent. You know, a bit not quite in the same positive mindset mood that I would normally be. And I describe physical training. You know, I train every day, as you know, for an hour at 7 o'clock. And it starts my day, and I've described it as a form of meditation, as you know, relaxation. People look at me with, you know, as if I have two heads when I describe it that way. But do you find, or have you found that the people that you work with, once they start that process of re-engaging, becoming, you know, not necessarily fit but more physically active, do you find that that has an effect um, on their outputs in terms of, and again, we're talking general terms here because, again, different things for different people, Ed. But do you find that what comes as part and parcel of that physical process also has benefits in terms of their outputs when it comes to performance in life, whether that's work-life balance, whether it's performance at work? Again, are you seeing, you know, I guess my question is, what are your goals and objectives with these people? It isn't just about sticking somebody on a treadmill for an hour and say, you know, just get a bit fitter. There's obviously lots of other benefits. So typically, what are you finding in terms of outputs when you talk about physical and mental well-being?
Sure. So I'm trying to um, many of the CEOs that I work with are incredibly productive people who have a to-do list that is longer than could possibly be achieved ever, and obviously constantly mounting. So there's an awful lot of prioritization, and then there's the need for using willpower to force things into their lives, and often following a path of burnout if they keep going in the direction that they are. And so what I'm trying to do is restore them back to functioning in a way that's optimum for themselves and their brain without force. And one of the things that we know makes up a healthy animal or a healthy human is physical exercise. And so, just like you said, the body that is exercising, the body that is sleeping well, the body that is eating well, it thinks more clearly, it thinks more effectively, and so we end up producing less with more. And so exercise is just one of those things where, my clients will always, if I'm mapping out for someone, okay, where did this go off the rails? Where did you end up kind of descending into the patterns that don't take you where you want to go? One of the things that's like, okay, well, first thing I did was I removed exercise, I removed some sleep, I got some processed food delivered so that I could have more time, and then that domino effect downwards started to happen, rather than exercise being that one of those fundamentals. It's like, if this is in place, I know that I'm in the right mind, and then I start making better decisions and operating more effectively.
In terms of operating effectively, a lot of people talk about the whole, whole person concept, work-life balance. When we first met, it was at a point somewhere between Bristol and Bath. And then you picked up your entire life and moved it to Copenhagen. Not the certainly not the worst place in the planet. It's a lovely city. I've been there a couple of times. What made you make that decision? And what have you found? What have you learned as a result of making such a dramatic change? Again, lots of people who listen to this stream will often contact us, say, I really want to make a change. Don't know how to go about it. It seems, a bit overwhelming. I don't know what steps to take. And so they kind of sit there passively, hoping that something will change, but of course it never does. And then they end up with a good degree of regret. Was it a conscious family-based decision? Was it work related? Was there a new opportunity there? What caused you to literally pick up your life and move somewhere else?
Okay, well, I was stood on a beach, actually, maybe about 15 minutes walk away from where I am now. And I was visiting my in-laws with my wife, who is Danish. And we'd lived together for 14 years in the UK, and her dad was unwell. And we'd had this ongoing conversation that was, okay, my father-in-law's not well, mother-in-law's likely to be on her own. Are we going to build a granny annex? The kids were playing with their mother-in-law on the beach, and I just had this, I don't know, a moment of clarity. I just put the phone down to work, and I'd had this, okay, so I'm working an 80-hour week back in the UK. More of it is admin that I want to do. Maybe 3 or 4 weeks before, I'd interviewed this guy who was like, I just want to be a boxing teacher. And I'd been like, okay, talk me through that. And he was like, and then I'm going to own 1 gym and 2 gyms and 3 gyms. I was like, okay, so what do you imagine your life's going to be like? He's like, well, it'll probably be lots of admin. I was like, oh, right. Well, do you imagine a life of admin? And he was like, no, I want to be a boxing trainer. And I was like, okay. And like the epiphany that he was having, I was sort of having at the same time. Was like, I've built a lot of admin for myself. And then I just turned to my wife on the beach and said, hey, should we move here? And she says, yeah, all right. And then we're driving back from the airport, back from Heathrow, and we say to the kids, do you want to move to Copenhagen? And they're like, yeah, okay. And then we call the in-laws, and they're like, you're not coming. We're like, yeah, we're coming. And then we set up this 1.5-year plan to move, complete with, selling the businesses and selling the house and getting the kids into school. We're like, this is going to be 1.5 years. And then the in-laws, they're like, okay, it'll take you 1.5 years to get a flat in Copenhagen. So we've put your name on a list. And then 2 days later, they call us and say, you're at the top of the list and we've taken the apartment. You can pay us back because it will take forever to get to the top of the list. And then we're like, oh, okay. So we just, we flew over, we enrolled them, we did some interviews, got the oldest into school. and we just had 100-day timer set from then. Right, we need to untether our lives, and then when we finally arrived, kind of, I don't know, debriefed from what I absolutely loved about the life that we had in Bristol, and then what I didn't want, and then we gave ourselves a period of time where we were just going to build lives that we loved. So we booked up ski trips, and we booked weekends in our summer house here in the north of the country, and just trips that we wanted to take, hobbies that we wanted to explore. And then I stuck all of that in place first. And then I was like, okay, the business that I build in physical and mental performance, I'm never going to take on a single client that isn't a better experience for me than one of the things I would be doing here. So I was trying to consciously raise my standards of what I wanted. So it was no longer going to be just work to live to one day maybe have a life, but it was, how good could I make life that work has to compete with it on how much fun it could be to do that. And I would say that I've mostly kept to that. There's a few of those times where you're like, okay, but I actually do need to I do actually need to make some money here as well. But almost every time those compromises were an error, and I learned from them, and I adapted my system, and I taught myself some lessons of how I would do things differently, and just kept soldiering on with that same strategy. And it's been the best thing I've ever done, really.
Well, kudos to you. And I have to say, the best accountability plan I've ever seen put into place. Mum and dad buy daughter and son-in-law an apartment and say, it's done. Now shape and build your lives around that. So yeah, a great.
Okay, it was rent, and we did have to pay them back. But yeah, you're right.
Notwithstanding the fact that they kind of accelerated that whole process for you. Kind of, my point here is that accountability is obviously plays a big part in your life, where you set goals and you put timelines in the metaphorical sand, and then you work towards them. I think, as we've discussed on many occasions before, usually when I'm under far too much weight and you're stood over me going, come on, you can do that. The reality is that most people don't make themselves accountable. So as a consequence, have this kind of apathetic approach to life. So overall, Ed, in the time that we have left, what would be, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, and you might want to think about this, but what are the three lessons that you've learned from life and business, in your relatively short, you're still a young whippersnapper compared to me, but in that time that you've proven time and time again, how successful one can be, whether it's building a business, selling a business, moving their family to a different part of the world, and kind of seemingly starting all over again. Any mantras, life lessons, rules for survival or success in life and business that you kind of live by, that you run your life by these days?
Okay, well, the first one that I start all of my clients with, and every major religion says the same thing, and it's that the truth will set you free. And it's a nice saying, but I try and practicalize that with, our brain is a massive cognitive biases that protect us, but also protect our identity from us, us not feeling awful about ourselves all of the time. But they also prevent us from being able to move forward. And so the first thing that I do with all of my clients is get them to tell the absolute truth about every single area of their lives without judgment, just being precise. For example, a really useful one is with food. If you start photographing every single thing that you eat, you have total clarity around what you eat. Whereas what I found over the years is most people have got no idea what they eat. They just have an identity. around it. And you can do the same thing with looking at your calendar. You can do it the same thing of looking at your search history and your bank account and your mobile phone usage. You start with telling the absolute truth, and you'll be surprised how much emotion is wrapped up in there. Guilt and shame around, oh, I'm about to photograph this thing that I'm eating, but I really want to eat it just unconsciously. And just noting that down, and even more so, sharing it with someone else and watching how they don't run away from you and heavily judge you. Telling the truth there helps us really, really lose emotion. And the next thing is, what if you stopped doing it would allow you to have the things that you want? You know, we talk an awful lot about the I want this goal and I'm going to hold myself accountable to it. But firstly, getting clear on what we're doing, and then which of those things that we're doing is preventing us from having the experience of life that we want. Because life is cause and effect. And so if we're experiencing effects that we don't want, then we're causing that in some way. And so what if we stopped doing it would allow us to experience way more of the life that we want? You know, it may be that that we have a dream of a level of health that's way off in the future, but it's the staying up late right now and the derailing ourselves with some of the things that we eat that are generally causing that. And if we were to stop doing those things and also let go of the feelings around those things, we'd already start to experience way more of the feelings that we want and start moving towards the results that we want. Yeah. And then the third one is really all about meaning. Everything in our present environment is wrapped up in meaning. And the meaning that we attach to it is either supporting us to go where we want to go, or it's preventing us from going where we want to go. So if the meaning that we've wrapped up in exercise is a useful one, if the meaning that we've wrapped up in it is that it's hard and we have to slog our way through it and it's not fun and we're bad people if we don't do it, that's just going to push it away from us. But if it is that we are looking after ourselves and any kind of movement is better than no kind of movement, and it can be fun, and finding that fun, it's going to move us to a place where we weren't before, and then we'll become new people for that, and that new person that we become will be capable of doing more. So we don't need to race to the hour in the gym every morning, right? We just start exactly where we are and go, what is it that would move me away from here? What meaning could I have around exercise that would allow me to do better than I am now? And then integrate that. And then I become a new person. And then I can ask the same question. What new meaning, again, around exercise would allow me to bring in more and more and more and more? And we can do that around our relationship with everything. And relationships is really the key. Relationships with people, but as well relationships with food and relationships with exercise and relationships with sleep and with our phones. It's all projecting into the future and allowing us to create the lives we want, or protecting us from ever being able to have the life that we want.
Well, I have to say, you answered that last question expertly. I did put you on the spot, and on the basis we haven't pre-rehearsed any of this, that was brilliantly done. And I think that's a fantastic place to leave today's chat. I could ask you a series of questions to follow that, but I think that's probably a really fantastic place to leave it. Lots of takeaways from everyone's perspective that is listening in all different parts of the world. So Ed, thank you so much. Great to see you again. Hopefully we get the opportunity to do a bit of personal training, frankly, in Copenhagen. That would be pretty cool. But
coaching, I don't do personal training anymore.
Well, no, but even so, there must be a gym net. You can't tell me you're in that good a shape and not still go to the gym. So what I'm saying is a bit of spotting would be nice. But you know, in terms of the business that you now run, for all the good that you do, you know, congratulations. Keep doing what you're doing. Wishing you every success in the future. And no doubt we'll have you with us again, having another chat about the next stage in your fantastic journey. So thank you very much for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.